In this tutorial, I'm going to be painting a beautiful fall landscape inspired by the Sierras. Now, what I usually like to start off with is a quick black and white sketch, in this case, a black and burnt umber, kind of like a matrix study where I'm using two values. And the reason why I like to do this is because it just gives me a really quick blueprint of where my shadows and lights are going to be and where my biggest masses are going to be. And figuring that out is, in my opinion, so important in really figuring out what the structure and what the composition of your painting is going to be. So I just pulled up some quick sketches I did when I did a road trip to Arizona and New Mexico. These were all done in the car, and by no means are they perfect, but I was just scribbling with a ballpoint pen just to sort of get fun shapes. There's so many beautiful rock formations out along the freeway, and just to try to capture them almost from memory because I was in the car is something that I love to do. And something that I'm going to show you really quickly how to do. And it takes maybe about 30 seconds to a minute. So really looking at the reference photo, I can already see that I want the highest area of contrast to be where the water is. That's, you can see it in the painting, that beautiful glisten. Now everything around it is what I'm going to need to design a little bit more. I'm actually going to lower the foreground triangle of land down a little bit because there's kind of a lot of area of nothingness there. And I'm going to lower the whole river to the bottom rule of thirds up to the half. And what I'm doing right now is I'm going to pull up a wonderful reference by Clyde Espivig because I want to reference his colors and really how he paints these fall colors. Because to be honest, I've never really painted anything fallish because I'm from San Diego. So here's one painting that I'm going to reference. And here's another one that I found that I really love. So I'm just going to screenshot it. I'm just going to go back to these once in a while, have them open to sort of see how they're arranging their value structure, how they're capturing the yellows. You can see these are two quite different paintings. Well, the top one is a reference photo, but I usually have a reference photo and then maybe a couple references. Sometimes I won't have references open at all because what I find is that it distracts me, and I actually find that I can't paint very well and I can't channel myself out when I have too many references open. So my personal tactic is that I like to look and study at everything that I take inspiration from. I take mental notes, and then I turn everything off and I just start painting for my own. Now, this might be a little bit hard if you're more of a beginner and maybe you do rely more on photo references or other painting references, which is totally fine. But it is also good practice to not really rely on those so much and really use your intuition to tell you what is working and what is not working in a painting. So that's just my method now. I find that when I have too many references open, I tend to get too stressed trying to copy what I see, and then I forget completely to even, put my voice in. So that's why I've done this. Maybe you're totally different and you can have hundreds of references open and, be able to balance everything. What I'm doing right now is that I am putting on the grids to help figure out my composition a little bit more. I'm putting down the rule of thirds grid. This is a centerline grid. And I might put the diamond grid on, but I'm not sure. I oftentimes use grids to help me place important elements. So you can see areas where the centerline grid and the rule of thirds grid cross, the intersections, the points, are areas where I might want to think about putting important elements in, such as maybe where I want my river to weave in between and hit certain intersections. Maybe I want the top of that foliage on the left to maybe hit the top rule of thirds or maybe slightly above it, right? So elements don't need to hit these intersection points completely. These grids are just guidelines. And you can see that I just really quickly put them on to help me figure out the arrangement of my masses and my shapes, and then I turn them off. I don't like to be tied to grids, and I'm going to be doing more lessons on grids in the future, but it's just a very fast way to help me organize my thoughts a little bit more. And as you can see, I just get right to it, right? So So what I'm using right now is the U tool. And I mentioned this in my other tutorials, but I love this tool to start off because it just helps me get bold, graphic shapes with no gradient to really slap down the biggest masses that I see. I'm using the U elliptical tool, so I can make ellipticals of any shape, any size, any width, and really play around from the get-go with different shapes and sizes, right? I'm not, I am limited to the type of shape, but then, I can put varying, versions of that shape. So that's quite fun for me. It's limiting and it's fun at the same time. So right now it's going to look like a heap of abstract shapes maybe, and that's totally fine with me. I love this stage because it helps me not to be tied down to the literal. I'm not thinking, okay, here's a bunch of trees, here's a foreground, here's another little bush to the right, there's a bridge, there's water, there's mountains. I'm thinking of how everything is working together as a whole. Does that shadow color of the water make sense? How does it look when I put the glisten? Does the light side of the trees that are being beautifully rimlit by the light, is that working? Is the shape of the tree too rectangular? Do I need to, vary that a little bit more? These are things I'm thinking of. I'm not ever thinking about, did I render that correctly from the get-go? I'm always looking at my shapes in relationship to each other, and my values in relationship to each other. So that's why I love limiting myself with tools like these. I am also using my favorite block-in tool, and I can't tell you the name because I didn't make it and I can't remember where I got it. I think I got it from John Park, but I can't remember. I never make my own brushes. So that's something I have to learn as well. So this brush allows a little bit of blending. It allows a little bit of beautiful, almost like a gradient dry brush, which allows me to start merging some of those harder edged shapes that I put down, right? So in the beginning stages of my painting, I will go back and forth between the hard edged graphic U tool to my favorite block-in brush. If you're familiar with any of my other tutorials, I really don't use that many brushes because it kind of slows down my workflow, and I like to paint very fast. I like to slap down as many of the values, as many of the colors as I can to get a painting working holistically from the get-go. I never focus on one area for too long. As you can see, I've just jumped from the water to the mountain because I thought, I need to see how much that water will stand out compared to the value of the mountains that I put down, right? Now, as you can see, compared to the photo reference on the top right, I'm considerably lightening the values of the mountains a little bit, just to give a little bit more atmosphere and a little bit more depth, right? I want to push the foreground a little bit more towards us. And I also really want to contrast the water. I really want to try to capture that glisten. This piece really proved challenging. It was one of those pieces where I thought, okay, I understand the lighting. I understand how to paint it. And then when it actually came to painting it, there's all these little things that I guess I didn't, foresee, obviously, because I'm not psychic. And then it was a very fun challenge for me. And it was more of finding the balance of shapes, the harmony in the shapes, the harmony in the value, not making something too bright, slightly pushing something too bright, as in the value is too light, was already too much. So it's really finding that right balance in every painting that you do. So right now you can see I'm trying to vary the shape of that big mass of trees in the midground on the left. Finding the shape of this tree was a challenging part, I will say. I was just never happy with it because there is one tree that's kind of sticking out and it looked kind of funny to me, and it's also tangent to the mountain, if you can see. So I'm trying to redesign a little bit from what I see from the reference photo. I don't want to be a slave to the reference photo. I want to take inspiration from it, but also make it my own, right? So that's what I'm trying to figure out right now.